So why is Andy Worthington here all the way from the UK? It has a lot to do with the fact that he is the person who pursued the stories of all the Guantanamo prisoners since 2006. We were talking to a high school class today, and he was saying that when he wrote his book, he thought, well, I'll write this book, but it probably won't get much notice because there's going to be a lot of books on this subject. But there haven't been. There's been one book on this subject, the Guantanamo Files, the stories of the 779 men detained in America's illegal prison. And so let's hear from Andy, the star of Stage and Screen.
Yeah, hello everybody. Well, obviously I know some of you, but there are many people here that I haven't seen before, so it's great to see you here. I have been coming here for 5 years now in January to campaign for the closure of Guantanamo on the anniversary. What a wretched time for President Bush to have opened it on January the 11th, and it's very cold this year. But and I've, over the years, been doing all kinds of things to try and work to get Guantanamo closed. I started off by writing a book. I've been a journalist, still am a journalist, writing about Guantanamo. I made a film about Guantanamo. So this time I thought I'd sing you a song as well and see whether that was going to work. The We Stand with Shaker Aamer campaign is something that came about because about a year ago I was involved in a parliamentary meeting in the UK, which is where our elected representatives, MPs, can take a room in the House of Commons and get supporters of any particular cause together and discuss it and work out how to go forward on things. So we've had these meetings regularly with the support of a handful of really great MPs that we have in our country. As you know, most elected politicians are not great. And the same applies in Britain, really. Maybe less corrupt and less influenced by megabucks than here, but still most of our politicians are useless. There are a handful of our politicians who are great, very, very supportive of really good causes, including Shaker Aamer's cause. And at that meeting, I was talking about how we could take the campaign forward, and I thought what we needed was a giant inflatable figure of Shaker Aamer, which my intention was that it would rear up behind our politicians whenever they were out and about, and we would be able to embarrass them. And literally, Shaker is the elephant in the room of US-UK discussions. Of course, it's actually not really practical to have a giant inflatable figure rearing up behind the Prime Minister. You would get arrested. But there was a woman, Joanne McInnes, in the audience that night who thought it was a good idea, and so we talked and she got it designed, and then she got the inflatable figure made. And then we spent a lot of last year working out what we could do with it. And somehow Joe particularly wanted to start approaching people who were well known to get them to stand with the figure and to see whether it would catch on. So we've had a lot of actors and actresses involved, we've got writers involved, we've got politicians of all parties involved, and it's something that has actually taken off. It's caught on. It's been picked up by the Daily Mail, which is a conservative, very popular conservative newspaper in the UK, which for years has had an anti-torture and anti-Guantanamo stance, even though it's a slightly confused newspaper and is quite racist in other ways. It has a huge circulation, and it's great that they've taken up Shaker's cause because they're really quite close to David Cameron, and other conservative figures in the UK are also being very supportive. And I'm not surprised, really, because, this prison has been open nearly 13 years. It will be 13 years on Sunday. We're going into the 14th year of operations of a place that should never have existed, for reasons that we all know and have been explaining for years. If you're going to deprive somebody of their liberty, there are only two ways that you can do that are acceptable, unless you want to be some kind of vile totalitarian dictatorship. And the only ways that you can do that are that you accuse somebody of a criminal offense and put them on trial, or you hold them as prisoners of war according to the Geneva Conventions until the end of some defined hostilities. That hasn't happened. The men in Guantanamo still wake up every day not knowing when, if ever, they will be released. There is no mechanism There is no mechanism whereby these men can be released. It is all political. There is no end of sentence. There is no end of the conflict. If President Obama loses the initiative that he's been showing for the last few months tomorrow, those guys are not going to be released. It requires this political effort all the time, because this was a place where the Bush administration broke all international and domestic laws and treaties to establish it. And this is what happens when you have a kind of rogue administration like that one. When you break everything like they did, it's very hard to put it back together again. So, Shaker Aamer Joe and I discussed whether I should bring the giant inflatable figure of Shaker Aamer over here, which I was quite prepared to do. And now I'm here, I am thinking, it would be worth trying a giant inflatable here, because it picked up on people, it got people's attention in Britain. When we carry it around in the street, people are interested. They want to know what it is. It's got something about it. But I didn't want to come here and just focus on the story of Shaker Aamer, because as a British person, quite clearly, it's important for everyone in Britain who cares about justice, especially in this year of the 800th anniversary of Magna Carta, to be putting pressure on one person, David Cameron, our Prime Minister, to get him to pick up the phone and tell President Obama that he needs Shaker Aamer back in the UK. Now I'm here in the United States, of course, your president is responsible for all the men in Guantanamo, not just Shaker Aamer. And although, I would say and have been saying for many years that Shaker clearly should have been at the top of the list of people to be released, because in Congress, lawmakers have passed all kinds of laws to make it difficult for prisoners to be released from Guantanamo. And one of the most obvious of those is that they were suspicious of pretty much every Muslim country on earth and wanted to make it very difficult for the Obama administration to release people. Britain by no means constitutes a difficult country for the United States. We are your closest ally, and releasing him ought to be straightforward. But being here now with the anniversary approaching, I wanted to make sure that we were going to talk about all the prisoners and not just Shaker Aamer, that we were going to talk about Fahd Ghazi, who we're going to hear from Omar, from CCR, who's one of the Yemeni prisoners who have been the ones who have been constantly neglected. Because within the United States establishment, and I mean the whole political establishment, really, there is a great unwillingness to contemplate releasing anyone to Yemen, because the entire country is regarded as dangerous from a security situation. Now, that shouldn't be the kind of consideration that applies when someone has been wrongly detained, or when somebody has been detained on the dubious kind of basis that prisoners have been held at Guantanamo, and then these review processes are undertaken where the lawyers say, don't talk about innocence and guilt, just talk about whether we can mitigate the risk. What this ends up is, nearly half the men in Guantanamo have been approved for release by a high-level task force established by President Obama, and the majority of those men, at the moment 52 out of 59, are from Yemen, and the administration won't release them to Yemen. And I think that that's a disgrace, but at least we have seen in the last few months Yemenis being released. They're being sent to other countries and given new homes, but they are finally leaving Guantanamo, because we have been here year after year going, what is it with the Yemenis? How can we get some kind of movement where these people are released? Because they have spent years being condemned solely on the basis of their nationality. And clearly it's unjust, because an example I've used in the past is, if someone from California is released from prison and commits a crime, only the most insanely right-wing people would suggest that that means that nobody from California should ever be released from prison again. I mean, I hesitate even to mention that, because it might filter through to the most insane right-wing people who'd be like, yes, 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 never release anyone from prison. But that's the kind of place that Guantanamo is, and for years that's what we've been fighting against. We've been fighting against very dark, powerful influences whose intention was to keep it open forever. These people still exist. There are people in your country in positions of power and influence who love having Guantanamo open. They love the ability to imprison people without having to justify why they're doing that. And that should go against everything that I believe in, coming from the country that gave habeas corpus to the world, and that you should believe in, obviously, as a nation that founded on the rule of law. So we're not we're not out of the woods yet. There has been progress lately, and I hope that as many of you as possible can come on Sunday to the protest outside the White House. I hope that you carry on, or if you haven't been involved before, that you take up this cause, and that we all find ways to keep pressure on the Obama administration, because it is clear that the intention is there to try and close Guantanamo. From that promise that he made in January 2009, all the resistance that he met, his lack of political will to overcome the obstacles, we've been seeing some progress. But none of us can hold our heads up high until that place is closed down once and for all, because it should never have existed, and it must not exist again the day that we can finally close it. But that's what we all still need to be working towards.
Right on.
Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma, y antes de morir me quiero echar mis besos del alma. Todos. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guantanamera. Un verde claro y de un carmín encendido. Mi verso es de un verde claro y de un carmín encendido. Mi verso es un ciervo herido que busca en el monte amparo. Everybody. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, hey, hey. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. Cultivo una rosa blanca en julio como en enero. Cultivo una rosa blanca en julio como en enero. Para el amigo sincero que me da su mano franca. Guantanamera, oh, Guajira, Guantanamera, hey, hey. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. Con los pobres de la tierra, all the poor. Quiero yo mi suerte echar, I throw myself to you, con los pobres de la tierra. Quiero yo mi suerte echar, el arroyo de la sierra me complace más que el mar. Todos.